Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday to you. It is 8:23. So with spring in the air come all the bee stings and all the dog bites. And for some kids, that's more than just the new season starting. So Dr. Monique Jericho is here with us, child psychiatrist, to help us understand when is that just a child being normally afraid of things and when is that a phobia? Good morning to you.
Hi.
So what are we talking about here? What are some common examples of these sort of anxieties that could actually be real phobias?
Well, I think it's important to start by distinguishing sort of the difference between normal childhood fears and what we would call phobias or specific phobias.
Okay.
Because, of course, it's very normal and natural for our kids to be afraid of things. And, in fact, it's important for kids to be afraid of things so that they know what to stay away from.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
But when we're talking about phobias, we're talking about extreme, irrational, and excessive fears that are generated to any kinds of objects or situations in our environment. And it can really get in the way of kids being able to do things in their lives that are important.
Okay, so let's use like the bee sting for an example.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Okay.
Okay.
So if a child has an excessive amount of fear, they can present in a variety of different ways: crying, tantruming, clinging. They can become so overwhelmed that they would have even like what we would describe as a panic attack.
Oh.
Heart racing, difficulties breathing. And all of that is pretty terrible, but what that leads to is almost more problematic because what it leads to is avoidance.
Okay, right. So their kid is maybe not going outside to play as much as they should be,
Right.
or going to camp or whatever the case may be.
Exactly. All of a sudden, your child is unable sometimes, due to the extreme fear, unable to do things that other kids can do.
Right. Okay, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
So what can a parent do about something like that?
Okay. So a variety of different things. First of all, prevention.
Okay.
Okay. So phobias are fairly common, right?
Right.
So we could argue that not argue, I think we know statistically that there's about 5% of kids who struggle with phobias, specific phobias like the ones we're talking about, 15% of teens,
wow,
and still about 5% of adults.
Wow, that's a pretty common thing.
It's a pretty common thing, and it's pretty natural for adults to have pretty strong fears of things. What you don't want to do is role model that to your child.
Oh.
Especially if your child is a little bit temperamentally sensitive.
Okay.
So if you don't like bees or wasps, you don't want to be freaking out every time a bee or wasp comes around, because what is your child learning about the danger of that situation? They're not getting a rational sense of what the risks really are.
Okay.
So we have to be really careful how we role model as parents.
Okay.
Beyond that, there's a lot we can do to teach kids about fear and anxiety in general.
Oh, okay. What does that look like?
So what we want to do is we want to help our children to understand what is this that's going on for them when they get afraid, right? So helping them to name what's happening for them. So
like
for instance,
what?
when your heart's racing, you're having a hard time breathing, that feeling has a name, and we call that anxiety, right? And by giving it a name, it normalizes it for the child.
Oh.
They can start to understand, hey, okay, this is an emotion. Everyone else seems to have this emotion. And as soon as you can name something, you can tame it. So they say name it to tame it.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So once you can name an emotion, then you can start working with that child on how do you manage that emotion? Right. What are we going to do differently the next time you start to feel this way? And all of a sudden you can build in strategies to help your child cope better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you outline a little strategy, say, for example, the bee-wasp example?
So the bee-wasp example, first of all, you want to get your child to notice that they're having this reaction. You want to get them to name it in their mind. I am feeling afraid. Right?
Okay.
And then they can kick in their strategies. Sometimes it's something just as simple as deep breathing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes children can learn how to distract themselves with different kinds of thoughts.
Okay.
Sometimes kids work really well with mantras or things they can say to themselves at a time when they're starting to notice themselves becoming overwhelmed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
A fantastic strategy. I love it. Monique, thank you so much for being here. Great advice as always.